Hi all, this is Corinne from Spirea Herbs and Snail Strails Homestead, and you're here in my kitchen today. Video has been long overdue, and I thought since I'm making a large batch of kombucha that I could show you how I do that and what my process is. So let's get started. So I've got my kettle going, starting to boil the water. And when I make my kombucha, I use, as you can see, I use black tea and I use rosehip tea. And I'm going to make sure there's a link to my blog that's got the specific recipe, but I'll talk you through it. But first I'm going to talk to you about using a really good water source. So it's, kombucha feeds off the minerals and that's found in your water, but also you can kill your culture if you've got either fluoride or chlorine in your water. So we use a Berkey water filter. You can actually see me in the reflection there. So there's our Berkey tabletop water filter. And I highly, highly recommend the Berkey. So I'll make sure I put a link to my review on it in the blog post. But this is, I use this to filter my well water. And this ensures that I have the absolute best water for making my sweet tea, which is the first step in the kombucha brewing process, is you basically want to brew and create a sweet black tea. So in each one of these mason jars, I have 3 tablespoons of organic cane sugar. I'm using 1 tea bag of black tea and 2 of rosehip. And I tend to brew really large batches at once. And when I'm ready to bottle it and transfer my SCOBY and all of that, I'll show you you know, how large a batch I tend to make at once. But your first step, as I said, is you want to brew. So these are 1 liter mason jars. So in each one of these is 3 tablespoons of organic cane sugar, 1 black tea bag, and 2 rose hip. And the knife is in there to help absorb the heat so your glass doesn't crack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to brew up my tea. And we're going to let that cool down completely to room temperature. If you put your SCOBY in while your tea is hot, it will kill it, which will result in no kombucha for you. So I brew up my tea. I'm going to let it come down to room temperature or cool, and then I'll show you what I do. Okay, so I'm getting ready to bottle my old batch of kombucha and get a new one going. So this is, let's see if I can get it good. Looks kind of slimy and such, but this is my fully fermented kombucha, and you can actually see, and I'll see if I can capture, see there's bubbles along the side there, and that is actually the old SCOBY that I put in probably about 4 weeks ago. So SCOBY stands for Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast. So every time you make a batch of kombucha, you're going to get a brand new SCOBY. So if you have friends that are interested in doing fermented beverages and you want to share in the SCOBY love, I would highly recommend, you can give it away to friends, but it's also excellent for your compost. So don't feel bad if you take your old one, as you can see in there, and just stick it in the compost, because it'll be excellent for whatever soil it is that you're creating. So as I mentioned, this is the finished batch here, and I'm going to be doing a second ferment in my grill style bottles, and we've had the best success by actually using a little bit of juice. I used to just put fresh fruit or frozen fruit in, but I'm finding that I'm getting higher carbonation levels and a much tastier end product if I put a 1/4 cup of juice in each bottle, and then I add the kombucha into it. So as you recall from the first video, these are my finished sweetened black teas. I also use rosehip. So this is not kombucha yet. It will become kombucha. So as you can see, I make very large batches when I'm working. You don't have to. You can create small, single size batches like this. It's really up to you. And your SCOBY will grow to the size of your jar. So if you're using jars like this to make yours, your SCOBY will be this size. But as you can see, because of how wide the glass jar that I'm using is, my SCOBY is equal, because it forms, I shouldn't have taken out so you could have seen it, but it forms on the top of the batch as it's fermenting. So what I'm going to do is for every, this is a 1 liter jar where I've made sweet black tea with some rosehip tea as well. So for every one of these jars, I'm going to keep half a cup of my previous batch. So I'm going to pour about 1.5 cups into this Pyrex dish here, then pour the rest of that kombucha out into my large Pyrex measuring cup here. It really doesn't matter what you use. I just find it's easier to pour from this because it has the spout, as opposed to trying to pour from that into my bottles. So I'm kind of doing 2 things at once here, getting the second ferment and bottling going. Now you don't have to do a second ferment. You can drink your kombucha just like this, but we like ours flavored. So as I mentioned, I'll be putting juice in the bottom of all of these and letting them sit on the counter for about 2 to 3 days, and then I'll put them in the fridge. And at the point where you put your kombucha in the fridge, it will stop fermenting. As long as it always has a sugar source, it's going to keep fermenting. So you don't want to keep your kombucha on the counter for 2 to 3 weeks, because it will literally explode when you open it. It will have continued to ferment. So I'm going to take this for my second ferment, bottle it, saving about 1.5 cups to add to my my new batch. So I'm going to do that now. I'm by myself today, so I don't have any help with the filming, but I will endeavor to show you the steps as I go along. So as you can see at the bottom, I've got my 1/4 cup, and I'm using cherry juice today just because we've been really liking that. And all I'm going to do is pour my kombucha. Sorry, it's hard to pour and not spill and have the camera going, and fill my bottle. And I leave a little bit of headspace for room for carbonation. Yeah, and that's all there is to the second ferment. So I'll keep that on the counter for about, and then here I'll show you how. So I filled it to about the shoulder level, and then I'll just seal it and leave it on the counter for 2 to 3 days, usually 2 days, just because I'm always nervous about it exploding everywhere. And then it'll be kind of a cherry flavored, sweet and vinegary fermented beverage. I use it a lot in smoothies, but that's basically how I do the second ferment. I just pour the already finished batch of kombucha in with a little bit of juice into a growth style bottle. Alright, so I'm ready to make my new batch of kombucha. And I managed to get, as you can see, I got 5 bottles. I ran out of growth style bottles, so I actually used an old like store-bought kombucha bottle, and they work really well. So those will sit on the counter for probably about 2 days before I put them in the fridge to stop the fermentation process. So this part is really easy. We already have our sweet black tea, and remember I do use rosehip as well. And you just want to make sure that it's room temperature, because any warmer it will kill the culture. So I'm just dumping my teas into my container. Now, how long you let your kombucha ferment for is a personal decision. At least 7 days. I've found that any less than that, it won't actually form a SCOBY. But the longer you let it sit for, the more sugar. Because remember, we used 3 tablespoons of sugar for each one of these. So that's 9 tablespoons total, right? So the longer that you let your kombucha sit for, the more that this SCOBY culture is going to consume that sugar. So if you let it sit for a month, you're going to have more of a vinegary end product, but it's going to be much lower in sugar. So that's really great for people who are diabetic or watching their sugar intake. So if you let it sit for 7 days, your product will be sweeter. So it's really just personal preference and what you want to do. So this is that, I remember I told you need to keep some of your old batch of kombucha. So that's that 1.5 cups of kombucha from my old batch. Just going to add it right in. And then I'm going to take my my SCOBY, and they're pretty slimy. You can see, and they get pretty thick. And I'm going to slip that and add it right in. And then I'm going to, he's always hungry. And then I'm going to cover this with just a cloth and an elastic band, just to make sure you don't want to get any fruit flies or anything, any nasty business getting in there and contaminating your culture. And in about 3 to 4 weeks, I'll be ready to bottle my next batch, and I will have a brand new SCOBY that's formed along the top. So this will be my old one. The one that I've put in now will be my old one. And I'll either give it to a friend or compost it. And that's all there is to it. I know it can seem a little intimidating and scary, but it's really a fairly easy process. If you've brewed a cup of tea before, you can handle the tea brewing process. And the rest of it is just following instructions. So I definitely recommend you take a look at my accompanying blog posts. I've got 2, why you want to drink kombucha. So it talks about all the health benefits, and then all the step-by-step instructions on how to actually do what I explained in this video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.